Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Thanks everyone for coming. Hey there, sis. Thanks for coming in here, Bucket List. And we appreciate you coming in here, bro. Lots of love. When my supporters come in here, and we come in here, we're working together to try to stop these kind of things going on. Get the message out there, bring more awareness. This is a hideous story where the FBI and DEA, the raid, CPS headquarters in Chicago, rescued 800 infants. I know somebody's over here standing ready with a wood chipper. That's better for them, ain't it? Right? Okay, so let's go and do the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. As the Bible says right here, we got to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take out the cause of the fatherless, and plead the case of the widow. A lot of people who are my friends also at Facebook and different places, we're having a Zoom support group meeting. If you need any kind of, if you want to be supportive to others who might need emotional help or just being there as a friend, what you say in there stays in there. So I'm going to let y'all know I do that as well. It's called Beacon of Hope Support Group. And we'll be glad to have y'all if y'all got any kind of problems that y'all like to discuss as well. But you see, the only way we would tell anything is like if you're suicidal or going to harm somebody. That's the only times we do tell, all right? Without further ado, thanks everyone for coming in. Thank you over there in Facebook land as well. So let's share the screen here. I just took a drink, but you can't even tell it. Okay, thanks to purpose.lifetruepurpose.org. And I thank you to my friend David for bringing this to my attention. FBI raids CPS headquarters. 800 infants rescued from underground organ harvesting ring. This was written June the 4th, 2026. Can you believe that, y'all? The FBI and DEA jointly stormed the Child Protective Services Director's Chicago office, uncovering a horrific organ trafficking syndicate. Inside a hidden underground facility, agents miraculously rescued 800 missing infants. But what did investigators find inside the director's personal safe that left seasoned detectives completely speechless and terrified? I'm still processing the details from the raid. The fact that a government official orchestrated this right under our noses is beyond terrifying. Wait until you see the list of buyers who they recovered from the scene. The rest of the story is below. But I wish they would go ahead and say the people's name. We got it in the lower bottom here in a few minutes. I wish they'd go He had to give us the state senator's name that's still actively, that is a sitting senator. Part 2. Special Agent Sarah Jenkins pried open the heavy steel door of CPS Director Richard Vance's hidden wall safe, her hands trembling as the contents spilled onto the mahogany desk. It wasn't stacks of cash or offshore bank accounts. It was a thick black leather ledger and a stack of heavily encrypted hard drives. Vance, a man trusted for a decade to protect the state's most vulnerable children, sat handcuffed in a corner of his corner office. A sickeningly claim, arrogant smirk was plastered across his face as federal agents tore his workspace apart. The ledger documented over 4 years of coordinated foster placements that were actually black market transfers to medical research black sites. Let me see if y'all could hear me or whatever. And it says downstairs, chaotic scene unfolded, and as EMTs and heavily armed SWAT units carefully evacuated the 800 infants. And it also has it on. It has this right here. It says, but a Jenkins split through the blood-chilling pages of the ledger. The color rapidly drained from her face. The list of buyers didn't feature anonymous cartel bosses. Somebody said this is misinformation. But when I go, it's a different a couple other websites. It says cybercrime units are now frantically trying to trace the digital footprint of the signal. They called him the architect. Protocol Zero initiated the second facility. And I know it's also there at Facebook. And I know that there's also videos of it on YouTube. So let me see about the videos there. Okay, let me go to YouTube right quick. Okay. Because I like to get all the information I can. Stop sharing right now. Okay, let's see what that has to say of the videos when we get that. Okay. So let me do a search on that again. A while ago, I got rid of the. There's a U. This was a month ago. It says, okay. Hold on. Okay, this one's got. Okay, let me play this. Get off of that right quick. Okay, let me go to show y'all the video of the news channel. All right. Can y'all see it okay?
Two missing kids in the Justice Department's Middle District of Florida.
More than 100 personnel from 20 agencies joined forces in what's being called the most successful child recovery effort in U.S. history.
These kids have been through painful, disastrous situations.
5:17 a.m. Miami, Florida. The city was silent. No traffic, no voices, only the cold glow from a federal audit office still lit. 3 screens, endless rows of data, and then it appeared. A pattern, an anomaly, not an error, but an early warning signal of a child trafficking network emerging in early 2026. Within just 72 hours, 312 infant records had been entered into the system across 5 states. That alone was unusual. But what made her stop was this. More than 68% of those records had no verifiable hospital origin, and it traced back to a long-trusted Child Protective Services office. At the top was Victor Langley, a familiar name in the system. Decorated, trusted, until now. Everything was confirmed quickly. No sirens, no warning. A convoy of 12 unmarked vehicles moved into position. Within minutes, the entrance to the Child Protective Services office was surrounded. This was not routine. This was coordinated. Inside those vehicles were agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, a joint task force formed in less than 48 hours after what officials described as a critical internal breach. At exactly 5:23 a.m., the order was given. A steel bar slammed against the front door once. Then again, the lock gave way. Alarms echoed throughout the building as agents moved in with precision, securing hallways, isolating staff, shutting down internal networks in under 90 seconds. More than 130 federal agents flooded the facility, sealing over 40 offices simultaneously. Every computer was locked, every server connection cut. No one was allowed to leave. Inside, agents moved directly toward a restricted administrative zone. Entry required triple-layer authentication, but what they found there changed everything. Rows of secured filing cabinets, encrypted terminals, and a digital database containing records of over 3,200 infant cases processed in just 18 months, a number far beyond regional birth and child care statistics. Even more alarming, preliminary checks showed that nearly 800 of those infants could not be physically verified. No addresses, no medical records, no trace. This was no longer a compliance audit. According to one investigator on site, we're not just looking for missing paperwork, we're looking for something that should have never been allowed to exist. And by 5:31 a.m., less than 10 minutes after the operation began, a truth began to surface. This was no system error. This was concealed, organized, and operating silently within the very system designed to protect children. If these numbers make you uneasy, don't look away, because what investigators are about to uncover doesn't stop in Florida.
U.S. Marshals described this as mission critical, recently finding 122 missing and endangered children, mostly in Florida, during this 2-week operation.
Some were facing abuse, others being trafficked, many being exploited on the streets of our community.
Everything began with one quiet discovery at a small hospital in rural Orlando. A night shift nurse named Margaret Thompson had worked with newborn babies for more than 28 years. She was used to difficult nights, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw on that ordinary Tuesday. 8 babies listed in the hospital system as stillborn had mysteriously disappeared. No bodies had been sent to the morgue. No death certificates had been completed. The records showed that the infants had been transferred under emergency orders from the National Child Welfare Authority. Margaret knew something was wrong. She checked the records again and again. Every single file had been altered by someone with high-level government access codes, codes belonging to the agency of Dr. Victor Langley. By 5:38 a.m., investigators moved quickly. The evidence collection team opened the first set of files, neatly labeled and carefully organized, exactly the way any responsible agency would present them. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Intake forms were fully completed. Case numbers matched. Approval signatures were present. It looked efficient. It looked trustworthy. But within minutes, the numbers began to collapse. A rapid review of just 200 neonatal medical records revealed that more than 60% contained major irregularities. Identification codes were duplicated across multiple files. Addresses led to empty lots, abandoned buildings, or locations that did not exist at all. In some cases, the same infant appeared under different names approved through separate channels, each receiving independent funding. This was no longer a system error. This was a mechanism. As analysts mapped the distribution points, the situation became even more alarming. On paper, these locations were registered as licensed child care facilities, temporary shelters, or emergency intake centers. But when field inspection teams were sent out, the results came immediately. Out of the 27 listed facilities, 19 were closed, inactive, or completely non-existent. 6 were operational, but showed no records of the children supposedly assigned to them. Some files listed facilities that had been shut down for more than 3 years. That left only 2 locations with partially matching records, and even those files were incomplete. The system had been assigning children to places incapable of receiving them. At the same time, financial analysts began tracing the money flow connected to the operation. Federal support funds intended for newborn care, nutrition, housing, and medical assistance were automatically released after each case received approval. Within 6 months, more than $480 million had been distributed through these channels. But the money never remained where it was supposed to go. Transaction logs revealed a repeating pattern. The funds were broken into smaller transfers, usually $8,500, $9,200, or $9,800 at a time, just below the reporting threshold that would normally trigger federal scrutiny. Within only 48 hours, analysts tracked more than 1,700 smaller transactions connected to fewer than 40 shell accounts. This was not coincidence. This was systematic, and it was coordinated. At 7:42 a.m., a breakthrough occurred. One file partially loaded onto the screen. It did not contain medical records. It did not contain patient care data. It contained routing codes, short sequences of letters and numbers repeated across dozens of cases. Next to each code was a timestamp. Every timestamp matched the same overnight transfer window identified during the audit. They were following a controlled route, a pathway designed to move children out of the system without leaving any trace behind. And for the first time, one question was spoken aloud. If those records were fake, then where were the children? This was no longer just fraud. This was a structure built to hide something far deeper. Something that should never have been allowed to exist. And if you think this was only an isolated case, think again. Because what investigators were about to uncover may be far larger than anything anyone has seen so far. By mid-morning, the investigation had crossed a point of no return. The issue was no longer just about missing records. It was about a structure that had been operating quietly, systematically, and undetected for years. At 9:18 a.m., financial analysts began tracing the authentication codes recovered from the encrypted files. They discovered that none of the codes were random. Each one was tied to a transaction, not a massive payment at first glance. The amounts ranged from $18,000 to $42,000 per entry, classified as specialized neonatal care or emergency relocation assistance. Individually, the transactions appeared ordinary, but when combined, they formed something entirely different. Within the first hour, investigators identified more than 460 matching transactions directly connected to flagged infant records. By noon, the total had exceeded $96 million, and the money did not remain in one place. It moved from local accounts to regional service providers, then into a network of offshore investments routed through jurisdictions known for financial secrecy. 3 names appeared repeatedly: a private pediatric clinic operating on the outskirts of the city, a medical transportation company specializing in critical neonatal transfers, and an international humanitarian organization that, on paper, provided emergency relief across multiple countries. At first glance, all 3 appeared legitimate. They had licenses, certifications, regulatory approvals. But when investigators compared their operational timelines, one detail stood out. All 3 entities had been registered within the same 14-month period. All 3 reported explosive growth, revenues increasing by more than 300% within 2 years. And all 3 shared one silent connection: they processed the same group of children. As investigators followed the profits generated by these illegal operations, forensic accountants traced the payments through a web of offshore accounts. The funds moved through Belize, Panama, and Cyprus, circulating through shell corporations before returning to the United States, disguised as specialized medical consulting fees. The total revenue exceeded $480 million. But the money was not the most disturbing discovery. The real issue was the structure. Every infant case followed a controlled sequence. First, the child was entered into the system and marked as urgent, then transferred to a secondary facility. Next came reassignment under modified identification codes. With each step, the child's original identity became more fragmented. Names were changed, medical histories rewritten, tracking markers replaced. By the third transfer, the child no longer existed in the system in any recognizable form. They had been reclassified. Investigators internally began referring to it as a closed-loop system, a design in which movement generated its own documentation, eliminating the need for outside verification. No hospital confirmation, no independent oversight, only self-validating data. One investigator summarized the entire mechanism in a single sentence: they built a pipeline that looked like a care system, but functioned like an extraction system. By 1:30 p.m., the numbers had reached a level no one in the room could ignore. 812 neonatal cases were linked to encrypted financial transfers. More than $180 million had moved through complex financial channels. The routes extended across multiple states and at least 3 international corridors. But the most alarming detail came last. Every approval, every transfer order, every financial disbursement passed through a single control point tied to Langley. And at the center of it all, every authorization, every reassignment, every identity modification led back to one office: his office. Investigators also identified 9 senior subordinates operating directly beneath him, maintaining the system whenever he was absent. They generated schedules, transport routes, transfer lists, and approval sequences. But in the end, every final signature belonged to him. What investigators still did not know was how far the system truly extended, or who else inside the government structure might have been involved. Because the deeper they looked, the clearer one truth became. They were no longer looking at a network. They were looking at an infrastructure connected to hundreds of families across the country whose children had simply vanished. And if you believe systems like this should never be allowed to exist, then speak about it. Because what happens next may determine whether this truth is buried forever or finally exposed to the world. By the end of the first week, the investigation had reached a point of no return. What had begun as a data irregularity had exposed a controlled infrastructure, one capable of erasing identities, redirecting records, and moving newborn infants through a self-validating system. There was only one path forward. At 2:42 p.m., Federal Command authorized a coordinated operation, 6 locations, 1 operational window. No warning. More than 900 federal agents from multiple task forces, supported by tactical units and forensic teams, moved simultaneously. Their targets were highly specific: the Central Administrative Headquarters, 3 affiliated medical facilities, and 2 off-site storage locations connected to the transportation network. The first breach took place at the agency's headquarters. Within minutes, the building was under full security control. Employees arriving for the afternoon shift were stopped at the entrance and instructed to stand aside. All network connections were frozen. More than 140 workstations were locked down and mirrored in real time. No files could be deleted. No remote access to the system was possible. Inside the building, investigators discovered an independent server system still running on a separate power supply. The data volume measured 7.2 terabytes, encrypted across multiple partitions. It was not connected to the agency's primary network. It was completely separate, isolated, controlled. While cybercrime teams began extraction procedures, tactical units moved toward the external sites. At a refrigerated warehouse located just outside the city perimeter, agents forced entry into a temperature-controlled storage facility. What they discovered inside immediately transformed the operation from an investigation into an emergency response. Behind rows of industrial refrigeration units, hidden inside insulated compartments, were 27 newborn infants. Some were severely dehydrated, some were unconscious. None had valid identification. Medical teams were called in immediately. Each infant was assigned a tracking code. No names, no birth certificates, no official records, only numbers. At another facility, investigators uncovered dozens of falsified medical records, surgical logs with no traceable hospital origin, and transport schedules listing destinations that did not exist on any registered map. But the most critical discovery came from the data recovered at the central headquarters. At 4:18 p.m., after the first encryption layer was broken, analysts began to see the structure behind the system. It was not simply a list, it was a registry. More than 800 infant records, each assigned a unique identifier. Every file was connected to a sequence of transfers, medical procedures, and coded final outcomes. The timestamps were precise. The documentation was complete. The system had recorded everything. Within just 30 days, more than $94 million had moved through these channels, and every record carried the same authentication chain, the same approval system, the same source, the director. At 5:06 p.m., he was arrested. He did not resist. He said nothing. He did not need to, because by that point, the system had already begun exposing its true nature, and what investigators were about to uncover would make one fact impossible to ignore. He had never operated alone. The 9 senior figures working directly beneath him were also taken into federal custody for further interrogation. One investigator later summarized the discovery in a single sentence: "This was not a standalone money transfer operation. It was an integrated financial ecosystem designed to sustain itself." By then, the scale of what investigators were facing had become impossible to deny. The issue was no longer about one compromised agency. It was about a network that had embedded itself inside legitimate systems, used them, expanded through them, and remained invisible because it looked like normal operation. And for the agents still standing inside that building, one realization became absolutely clear. They were not uncovering the network from the outside. They were standing inside it. By the time the director was taken into custody, the investigation had already grown far beyond him. At first, federal agents believed they were dealing with a centralized operation, but the deeper they looked, the more complex the structure became. The isolated server revealed a layered network with backup access points, overlapping authority levels, and independent nodes capable of operating without direct supervision. The system had been designed to survive disruption. Within 36 hours of the raid, federal analysts identified at least 31 individuals with security security clearance levels high enough to authorize or conceal infant transfers. Among them were senior administrators, licensed medical specialists, and compliance officers, the very people responsible for protecting the system they had secretly corrupted. By the end of the second week, 43 individuals had either been formally charged or placed under active federal investigation. But the greater shock came from the financial structure. The offshore payment channels traced through Belize, Panama, and Cyprus were linked to a massive web of shell entities billing for advanced neonatal services and specialized biological transport. None of those services could be verified. Yet over 5 years, more than $520 million had moved through the system. Every transaction matched clusters of infant records transfers, reclassifications, or coded terminations. And not every case ended the same way. Some infant files showed long transfer histories. Others ended abruptly with coded entries matching no known medical or administrative classification. No discharge records, no adoption outcomes, no death reports, only final entries. Closed, untraceable. Out of the original 800 manipulated records, more than 190 cases fell into this category. Before the raids began, nearly 1.4 terabytes of encrypted data were remotely erased by an unknown user. Investigators believe the missing files may contain identities, transfer routes, and additional connections that may never be recovered, because what they dismantled was not simply a network. It was a model, a structure hidden inside legitimate institutions, protected by trusted authority, and designed to operate invisibly for years. And the question that still haunts investigators is simple. If one system like this existed, how many more are still out there?
Exactly. Yeah, it's got, let me hold it right there. Stop it right there.
What's that? Put your hands like this for me real quick.
Okay. We get it back over here. If you look over here to the right.
During that 2-week operation, the task.
Stop it right here. We get it all to the far right over here when it was, did y'all see what it said over there at the top of there? When I showed over here, it's like, it says FBI, a DEA raid. That's this description. Okay, here it says, hold on a minute. Okay, FBI and DEA raid CPS Director's Office, organ trafficking ring, 800 infants rescued in a shocking FBI raid that exposed a massive criminal network. Federal agents stormed the CPS Director's Office, uncovering an underground organ trafficking ring. This explosive FBI raid led to the rescue of 800 infants who were targeted for illegal harvesting. The daring FBI raid revealed horrifying connections between child services and black market operations. Following the intense FBI raid, DEA partners dismantled the entire supply chain in coordinate strikes. Public outrage grows after the historic FBI raid that saved innocent lives from exploitation. So this was actually saying it's in Florida on this video, okay? So the other information, I guess, got it from this and changed to locale, maybe. But here's where it's actually that y'all just watched it. I said it was in Florida, but that also said that these are coming from 5 different states. It's not just in one state; it's all around. So when we go like this, and I'll thank my friend to clarify and read to validate, because that wasn't the original to look it up more, so that caused me to look it up, and I found it here. And with this, but we need to stand up for the children. We need to save our children, because CPS worker, and so the CPS worker was even different than that guy, and it makes me wonder if he's doing something over there too. But right now, here's the real story of the one right here, at the FBI director and the 800 children organ harvesting. I want to thank y'all, so we get to the brunt of the truth when we find it, when we get it. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah. Hey there, Carlene. Good to see you. Hey, Charles. Yeah. It says about this guy. I had to replay it because at first it said it was in Chicago, But when I found it, somebody said it's misinformation, so I went and searched it, and it was saying it's around Orlando, Jacksonville, Florida. It's around in 5 different states and such. It's a big area. Hello there, Playowa. Is there another version from Fox? I had trouble finding some of the things. I found this one right here. The initial that was over here at, let me show you right quick. Hold on. I found this information at first, okay? And it's also at YouTube, right? But it says purpose.lifetruepurpose.org. And it said from Underground Organ Harvesting Ring. And this one's saying it's June the 4th, 2026. I don't know if that's true because I cannot find it anywhere else except for here and Facebook. It's not all over the news. So it might still, these people could have got it from that other story. I don't really know, right? But if it is true, the guy's name it's another CPS worker, Um, and according to the ledgers that was found, that they had it of 3 sitting senators. That was in the ledgers, and such as that. I think it's on the last part over here. So, and they said there was protocol 0 initiated. The second facility is already empty. Who is the architect, right? So we'll have to see what else going on and learn more information on this. But I can only show y'all what I can come up with. Hello, David Ken. Good to see you. And 2 versions on this channel. Well, I want to go and try to see. Somebody I found out about this, and so I wanted to get it out there. But when I looked it up, I seen that it actually was over there at FBI DEA raid, and it's in Florida. So try to get the word out there, try to look it up and find out more information. We got to get out there and find out the full truth and the full story of where it's done. Me being a survivor, it really is bothersome, as y'all know. But I'm passing on what I saying, and I'm praying. So they got that guy right there, and he is in handcuffs. Richard Vance. Yeah, that's what I was trying to find too, and the only thing I could find that I seen that video, and this video over at YouTube, and it's actually got like 8:30. Said there's a financial pipeline exposed, and there's fake records of missing infants initial anonymously because they're changing the kids' names, and that's another way that they're doing it. They had told the parents that the child were dead. How many other? It's kind of hard to believe that it's 800 of them, right? So we're gonna look. If you find out more information, keep me in tune. I will also, because it's important to keep the word out there, because too many of our kids are going missing. That's no. but I want to be able to find out the truth behind it. The actual, because I cannot find a true news article. I was looking in here. I did see in Florida, like I said, the video I played, it was a true bus that they had rescued 100-something kids, and then on the backside of that, it showed about the 800 children. Well, I'm going to close this out. I'll probably go ahead and delete this out since we don't know the full information, or maybe we'll go and look it up more, see what it comes about. And I think that's kind of weird because it says June the 4th. All right. Well, thank you so much.